Hi guys! Welcome to my home and to my office. This is where I get a lot of my writing done. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ali Standish. I am the author of The Ethan I Was Before, Augustile, Bad Bella, and most recently, How to Disappear Completely. This is my new book that will be out in April. I'm going to talk a little bit about this book today and about how I get my story ideas and how you can use my process in your own writing. So this is one of the most common questions that I get is where do your story ideas come from? And it takes me back to one of my earliest memories of me and my mom. When I would get bored on summer days, we would play this game where she would say, give me three things, any three things. They can be people or places, animals, toys, characters, plants, anything that's on your mind, anything that you're interested in or curious about. And you give me those three things, and I will make them into a story for you. And whatever three things I would give her, no matter how random or unconnected they would seem to be, she would take those and she would think about them for a minute, and then she would say once upon a time, and she would start a story. And without fail, she was always able to take whatever I would give her and connect them into a story. And so when I start thinking about writing a new story, even now, I still go back to that game that we used to play, and I still do the same thing. I think about a few different things that are interesting to me at that moment, that I'm curious about, or even things that I'm worried about, or anxious about, or fearful about. And instead of just picking one, I'll take three of those things, two or three of those things, and I will try to weave them together into a story. And for me, it's those connections between things that are really where the story comes from, rather than those things themselves. So I'll tell you about how I came up with How to Disappear Completely, and the things that were on my mind when I wrote this book and how I connected them. So I knew that I wanted to write a book about a character who has vitiligo. And if you don't know what vitiligo is, it's an autoimmune condition. It's very common. It's not dangerous and it's not contagious. And what happens is that parts of your skin lose their pigment in patches or spots. So it makes your skin turn really pale in places, and it can leave you with two tones to your skin. And the reason that I wanted to write a book with a character with vitiligo is that at the time I started this book, my husband had just been diagnosed with vitiligo. And he was really nervous about what kind of impact it was going to have on his life. There are ballerinas and actors and even supermodels that have vitiligo. And society is starting to see that people with vitiligo are beautiful and so unique and so cool. However, it can still be hard for some people who are living with vitiligo or who have just been diagnosed, who live in communities or go to school with people who maybe aren't as accepting of them and their difference in the ways that they stand out. And we didn't know how much my husband, Aki's, appearance was going to change as a result of having vitiligo. And we didn't know how people would react. And that was getting him really down and making him really nervous when we first got his diagnosis. Now it's a few years later. He's doing great. He loves his skin. He loves the way he looks. So do I. So does everyone in our life who cares about him. It hasn't changed the way that they have felt or looked at him at all. But that was the place that we were in a few years ago. So that was very much on my mind, and that was the first thing that I knew needed to be in this story, was a girl who was dealing with this diagnosis. At the same time, I wanted to write a story that had some magic in it. As a kid, I loved stories not only like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that took you to a different magical place entirely, but I loved stories where there was magic in the real world just waiting for you if you could find it in the right place. And so I wanted there to be a place in this story for fairies and trolls and gnomes and witches. So that was the second thing that I wanted to incorporate. The third thing was my husband and I had just moved back to the United States from England, where we'd been living for a few years, and we were living in this very quaint little British village, and I loved everything about it. I loved living there. I loved the people. I loved the little pubs. I loved our house was from the 1800s, and it had these thin glass windows that had huge cracks in them that were so big. We had to stuff plastic bags into the holes to keep spiders from coming in. I loved the daffodils. I loved the river that ran through the town. I loved the old church and the graveyard, everything about it. And I really missed it. And so I wanted to set a book in a village like the one that we had just left so that I could feel like I was back there, at least in my imagination. So those were my three starting points. I had a character with vitiligo, I had magic, and I had this small village that I wanted to set my book in. And that was where this story started for me. And it is a story about a girl named Emma who is living in the small village of Lanternwood, which very much resembles the village where my husband and I were living, Grantchester. It's a very tight-knit, sweet little village. And her Graham lives in this village, or has lived in this village until recently when she passed away. And Emma and her family had moved in to take care of Graham and now live in the village of Lanternwood. And Graham's passing is really hard for Emma to accept because Graham wasn't just her grandmother. She was also her best friend and her rock and her support system. And after Graham dies, Emma starts noticing these pale spots appearing on her skin and realizes after going to the doctor that she has vitiligo. And so she's struggling to deal with both her grief over her grandmother and her changing appearance and what this is going to mean for her. And she, as a way to deal with this, she returns to this very special place deep in the forest where she and her Graham used to go together. And where she swears that she used to see all sorts of magical creatures that she hasn't been able to see in some time. And the other thing that's special about this place is that there's a tree, you can actually see it on the cover. There's a big tree there that has a hollow in it. Where Graham and Emma kept a journal together where they would write fairy tales together. And Emma goes and she decides that she wants to write one last fairy tale. And so she starts one and she leaves the journal in the hollow of the tree. And she comes back, obviously not expecting anyone else to have written in the journal because this was a secret place that she only shared with Graham. But somebody has written to her in the journal. Somebody is helping her to write this new story. And so part of the mystery of the book, as she is figuring out her way in this new kind of world without Graham and with vitiligo, is also trying to figure out who it is that is writing to her in this journal and why. So that's how to disappear completely. That's how I came up with my idea for this book. And so what I want you to take from this is that whatever it is that you are interested in or curious about or going through, you can take those different things, and even if they don't seem connected, fairies and vitiligo don't seem to have much in common, but you can find those connections between those things, and that is what makes your story unique, is connecting things that nobody else has thought to connect before, or nobody else has seen connections between before. And I think about it like connecting stars in the sky into a constellation, into a shape. And if you are stumped for where to start with your story, what things you want to connect, sometimes I like to use a story ball. So this is my ball that I keep in my office all the time. And I use it sometimes when I'm a little bit stumped. And what I do is I'll flip it up in the air and I will look and see where my fingers land. So my thumb is on troll and my other thumb is on spaceship. And I think about how I could connect those things into a story. And how awesome does that? Who doesn't want to read a story about trolls on a spaceship, right? So that's something you can easily do at home if you have a ball like this, is just go and write a whole bunch of different words all over it. You can see some of my words here that I use. And do that activity where you throw the ball up and see where your fingers land and write a story about those things. Or you can write down a bunch of words and put them into a paper bag or into a hat, pull 2, 3, or 4 out and see if you can make a story that connects all of those random things into something really special and really unique. So now I will read you the first chapter of How to Disappear Completely, and you can see, I told you a little bit about what the book is about, but in the first chapter you can kind of see how all of the things that I just talked about come together for Emma's story. All right, here we go. How to Disappear Completely, Chapter 1. The spot appears on the morning of Graham's funeral. It arrives unannounced and uninvited, like a fly buzzing around a picnic. Not that my life is a picnic today. Or maybe the spot has been there for a while and I just haven't noticed. Maybe the only reason I noticed the little white circle now is because I've been staring at my lap ever since I sat down in the front pew. If I was wearing black tights like Mom told me to do, I probably wouldn't have noticed the spot just between my big toe and my second. But when I searched my room earlier this morning, every pair I owned seemed to be ripped or covered in boomer hair. We didn't have time to run to the store to buy a new pair. I know, because Mom said that 3 times before saying that I would just have to go to the church as is. As is an insult when it comes from Mom. It's still warm out, I reminded her. There's a whole week left before school starts after all. I don't need tights. Just then, Lily came gliding down the stairs, flawless as usual, from her shiny long hair to her own sleek black tights. Lily is my older sister, in case you didn't know, which you didn't, because I've only just started the story. There are 2 other things you need to know about Lily. 1, she is perfect. 2, she is going to Yale to study English next year, even though technically she has not applied yet, but she will definitely get in. See number 1 above. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Mom. You can tell that Lily is Mom's daughter not because they have the same complexion or eyes or hair, but because they are both the same kind of very polished pretty. Lily had spent the hour before locked in the bathroom we share, curling her hair and perfecting her makeup. I can't remember the last time I looked at my reflection in a mirror, except to get something out of my teeth. Dad came rushing down a moment later, and I was relieved when Mom pounced on his crooked tie, forgetting all about my tightlessness. A few minutes later, we were off. And now, here I am, sitting in the church, staring at the white spot on my left foot while the minister talks about God and heaven and angels. Now that I've seen the spot, I can't stop staring at it. I blink at the paleness of it against my skin like a tiny bright moon. I think of this one time Graham took me to the meadow by the river to sit with her while she painted. Well, we did that all the time, but this time I started pulling the paints from the old leather satchel she carried them around in and reading out all their names. They were called things like Icebox Plum and Whitening Willows. What color would I be? I asked. Graham looked at me thoughtfully. Then she said, You, Emma, are the color of afternoon light settling on the trees in the spinney. You can't fit that on the back of a tube of paint, I protested. Graham was always saying stuff like that, as if she were a poet instead of a painter. But secretly, I'd been proud. Spinney is an old-fashioned word for a little forest, by the way, and the spinney is the place where I wish more than anything I could be right now. I think the spot must be some kind of stain. I lick my finger and lean down, rubbing it. It doesn't fade like marker or paint would. Another, more alarming thought floats into my brain. What if I've managed to bleach my skin somehow? It seems like something I would do. If I have, Mom will kill me. As if to prove me wrong, she reaches an arm around my shoulder and gives me a reassuring squeeze. She probably thinks I'm looking down because I'm crying. I cross my right foot over my left foot so she can't see the spot and look around the church. It seems like almost everyone in Lanternwood has shown up today for Graham's funeral. A glance back reveals Ruth and Gloria and the rest of the garden club sitting directly behind our old pew, all of them wearing big black hats. Old Joe and Older Joe, who used to be Young Joe and Old Joe, have taken the morning off from the farms and sit side by side, their few strands of hair slicked back and their heads bowed respectfully. Even villagers who don't know Graham very well showed up to say goodbye to her. There are lots of people I know by face but not by name, like the Apple Lady. She never spoke to Graham as far as I could tell, but this morning she's in the back pew next to a family with 2 little kids I don't recognize. Their mom is sniffling into a tissue. I know I should probably be crying too. I should be thinking about Graham, not some weird spot. And you should know that I do think about her all the time since she died. It's just hard for me to think about her here. The old stone and brick church is just down High Street from her house, but I never saw her come inside. Sometimes we would take Boomer and walk through the graveyard, searching the mossy gravestones for funny names, or making up stories for how the people under them died. In the old section, of course, not the new one where people still put flowers by the stones. Anyway, You would be surprised by how many people died in the killer skunk attacks of 1919, including poor Billy Snagglehook, may God rest his soul. But mostly we spent our time in the spinney or down by the river where Graham told me fairy tales while she painted. In fairy tales, things are always changing into something else. Pumpkins turn into carriages, frogs into princes, mermaids into girls. Nothing is ever what it seems. Nothing stays the same. And I guess that's the way it is in real life, too. Graham didn't tell us she was sick until a couple of months ago. Not until she knew she was going to die. I still didn't believe it, though. Not until the sickness had changed her, turning her into a weak old woman. Then one day she fell into an enchanted sleep. That's the part the fairy tales get wrong, see. In Graham's stories, things usually come out right in the end. Sleeping Beauty wakes up. Little Red Riding Hood gets to go home. Graham did not wake up. Graham is never coming home. And with her gone, I don't know how the story is supposed to go. Okay, folks, that is all from me. If you like what you heard, you can pre-order How to Disappear Completely now. It's a great time to be supporting your local independent bookstores if you're interested in buying this book or any other. And it will be out on April 28th. In the meantime, if you do end up writing your own story, please feel free to come online and share it with me. My website is just my name, Ali Standish, AliStandish.com. There's a contact box where you can submit your story, tell me what inspired it, tell me what things that you were trying to connect together, and I would love to read it. So I hope that you stay well and stay healthy. I know that you're remembering to wash your hands and to keep social distancing, but also take care of your mind, take care of your imagination, and use that imagination, especially during this time where it's really hard to leave the house and to leave the news and the worries behind. Imagination can be a really powerful tool to help you through. I'm going to leave you with a quote that Graham gives to Emma about the power of imagination. And I hope that it can help you get through whatever difficulties you're facing as a result of what we're going through right now. Imagination is one of the greatest gifts we have. If we build it up strong enough, it can be anything we need it to be. A home, a friend, a whole entire world. I look forward to seeing the stories that you guys come up with. Use those imaginations. Stay well. See you soon. Bye.